Hello, and on today's show, Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup are back.
Spidey swings into the Civil War trailer.
The most interesting man in the world, rest in peace.
And Colgate University is now accepting transfers from Crest Community College.
Your emails and more on episode 15 of the Geek 30 Happy Hour. Welcome back to another episode of the Geek 30 Happy Hour, where we drink a toast to all the geeky things we're passionate about. Today is March 13th, 2016. My name is Alex, and that's Jojo on the other side of Skype.
Hello! How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm very good.
So, before we introduce today's guest, I want to remind our friends listening to go onto iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, where else are we? Satchel, a lot of different places. Go give us a 5-star rating. We've been getting.
You love us.
Oh,
we
yeah.
love you.
No, because we love you. And we appreciate that because it allows folks to find us. We've been getting more and more 5-star ratings. Let's keep it up. Let's keep broadening the listenership. Broadening, is that the right term, Jojo?
I want to say yes.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
So, and let's take a second to introduce today's guest. This is why we are on Skype, because he's on sort of the other side of the world, on the other side of the lake that is the Atlantic Ocean. Hello, Eric Morales.
Hello, gentlemen. Alex and Jojo, howdy.
Howdy. So tell the world a little bit about you.
Sure. So, hey, everybody. I'm Eric Morales. I run our games industry business for Amazon Web Services, and I'm sitting here in Stockholm, Sweden, looking after the Nordics.
Oh, wow.
I love that.
That's crazy.
So, Eric, you originally hail from this DC area. We used to work together, and I loved working with this guy. He's hilarious and just lots of fun to be around. Jojo and I worked at the same company, but I don't think you guys overlapped, did you? You guys didn't know each other, did you?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, as you guys can see, it breeds a lot of awesome people out of this company. So, Eric, we're going to get into a little bit about your love of video games and such. But give the folks at home, I guess, a little bit more about you, some of the things that you love, video games or TV shows or something like that.
Sure. So at the end of the day, I'm a fairly conventional and stereotypical geek, I would say. From a video game perspective, an equal opportunity lover of games. I sit on just about every console you can imagine at this point. I've even got a TurboGrafx 16
Nice.
underneath my TV right now, although the RF switch broke, so I need to...
No.
Yeah, which is actually a bit of a nightmare to replace. But
Is it?
We'll get there.
Well, we got Eastarline over here. If you need me to send you something, let me know.
There you go.
Nice. But yeah, I've been into games for a super long time. Was living in kind of a retro world for an especially long time. Within kind of the retro space, my core expertise is Neo Geo. I was a giant Neo Geo head, and for the Neo Geo fans out there who might be listening, I had a 2-slot gold cab NVS system. Those guys will know what the hell I'm talking about, I promise.
Well, excuse me while I go clean up on aisle 2.
Exactly. But yeah, a huge video game fan, and I feel super lucky to be working in this space today in kind of one of the major game development hubs in the world. We're super lucky that out here in the Nordics, which for those that might not be aware, the Nordics is comprised generally of Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland. And in our case, we also include Iceland. And we are, the Nordics is a hub of game development globally. We have really fantastic AAA developers like DICE and Mojang sitting here in Sweden. So DICE
I didn't know DICE was out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, DICE is a Swedish company.
Cool.
They were acquired by EA a little over a decade ago, and they've got an incredibly talented team out here building things like Star Wars Battlefront and the Battlefield series, which is how they made their name. Mojang, the guys who created Minecraft, are just 15 minutes away out here in Stockholm. Out in Finland, you've got folks like Supercell, who make the Clash of Clans series and the new Clash Royale that just came out. Over in Iceland, you have CCP Games, which makes EVE Online and EVE Valkyrie, which is coming out on Oculus at the end of the month. So lots of goodness out here in the Nordics, and super lucky to be working with folks like that.
That is so cool.
IKEA out there, so that's the original Minecraft, right? Build whatever you want, however you want to.
There you go.
Exactly.
There you go. All right, cool. Well, it's awesome to have you on the show, man. We've got a plethora of beers today, so let's talk about what we're drinking.
Oh, hello, Geek30. It's beer time.
Today's beer is brought to you by Long Distance Relationships.
Aw, that's like us, Eric.
That's kind of like us. got a little pond in between us, and it's kind of sad.
That's like us. You see, Skype helps keep the world connected.
I love the technology behind this, bringing us together like we're next door.
Yeah, it's cool. You guys are coming in great. So thank you, Skype, for making that happen. So getting into what we're drinking today, Eric has actually a little story to tell about the beer that we're drinking. So before we talk about what we're specifically drinking, each of us, because each of us has something different in front of us. Eric, would you like to tell a little story?
Of course. So my wife and I moved to Stockholm in August of last year. Excuse me. So prior to moving out here, we lived in Brooklyn, New York. Specifically, we lived in the most obnoxious part of Brooklyn, which is Williamsburg. And our apartment was about 5 blocks from Brooklyn Brewery proper, right? So kind of their home base in Williamsburg.
Can I just ask what makes Williamsburg the most obnoxious part? That made me laugh. What about that makes it obnoxious?
Have you been to Williamsburg, Brooklyn?
No, I don't think I have. I guess that's why I don't know.
There you go. No, listen, I loved Williamsburg. I lived there, but it's, it was kind of known for being kind of the stereotypically gritty, well lived in part of Brooklyn for a long time. 10 to 15 years ago, like people were still dropping bodies off there, and that's where the show Girls is based.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. But now there's a Whole Foods, there's an Apple store, it's crossed the threshold.
It's got a Whole Foods. If we learned anything from South Park, this latest season of South Park, that Whole Foods makes everything better. So that's that's great.
Yeah. So I lived in Williamsburg, and that's where kind of some big thought leaders in the hipster world, like Brooklyn Brewery and like Vice, for example, are based in Williamsburg. And so my wife and I and our friends in the city would always go to Brooklyn Brewery. They have not only do they have like a fun tour you can go on, but they just have a really, really great place to try their beer, and it's inexpensive too, like $5 a beer, which is great. Anyway, we go there pretty frequently. And so when we were considering moving out to Stockholm, we came to the city to visit, and we're kind of walking around the city, just taking everything in. And we decided to walk into a pub that we ran into in the southern part of the city here in Stockholm called Södermalm. We walk into the pub, and we see that right there on tap, they have Brooklyn Lager, which... I don't know. It depends on where your listeners are from, but Brooklyn Lager is still hard to find in a lot of parts of the U.S.
Right.
So us walking into this bar a couple thousand miles away from where we're from, we thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So we each order a pint and take in the random absurdity of finding our local brew in a different country, and then later on that evening we go to a restaurant. And that restaurant also has Brooklyn Lager.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
And then kind of the next day, we meet up with some, soon-to-be coworkers of mine, and we discover that bar also has Brooklyn Lager on tap. And then we quickly realized, especially after we moved here, that every restaurant, every bar in Stockholm has Brooklyn Lager or any of the assorted Brooklyn Brewery brews available in bottles or on tap. And I later learned that this is the second largest market outside of New York City for the Brooklyn Brewery.
Oh, wow.
That's fascinating.
It's crazy. And so as a result, their kind of lead brewmaster, Garrett Oliver, partnered with the Carlsberg beer company, which is actually a Danish company, but they decide they're the distributor for Brooklyn Brewery beers in the Nordics, and they created a brand new sister brewery, a part of Brooklyn Brewery called the New Carnegie Brewery. And the Swedish name for that is the Nya Carnegie Bryggeriet. And I'm butchering that, so apologies to your Swedish listeners. But
You're doing better than I am.
Yeah, it's a long friggin' name.
It is. It's more like it just jammed all of the words together in a single word.
They really
it's like it's all vowels. There's no actual like consonants in that either.
Exactly. And this local brewery, New Carnegie, it's named after another gentleman whose last name was Carnegie, which was historically a very old brewery here in Sweden. And there are buildings named after this guy here, and so they decided to name the brewery after him. And the beer that they serve here is in kind of the Brooklyn Brewery tradition. However, it's using Swedish ingredients. There's a Swedish brewmaster here named Anders Wendler, who kind of looks after things locally, and they've made some really fantastic beers. So
that's so cool. And so in the fashion of kind of connecting the two parts of the world that we are currently living in, and this New Carnegie Brewery doesn't have their beer over here stateside yet. Jojo and I picked up some beers from Total Wine and More from Brooklyn Brewery, and we each had something a little bit different. Eric, because he is over in that part of the world, is drinking New Carnegie. Eric, can you share what you are specifically drinking?
Absolutely. I'm drinking the New Carnegie Keller beer. And the Keller beer, it's to use their description on the back of the bottle, is an unfiltered, bottom fermented lager.
Okay.
It's hoppier than most lagers, and it's delicious.
That's awesome. So is that the only beer you're drinking? Because Jojo and I have a couple of them that we're trying.
I also have their session IPA called Jack.
Nice.
J.A.C.K, and it's also delicious.
That's really cool. Yeah, I can't wait for that stuff to come stateside. I want to try it. So what I've got over here is the Brooklyn Pilsner and the Brooklyn Lager, which Eric mentioned before. And the hoppiness is definitely a trait that even it comes over here to their Pilsner and their Lager both. I mean, they're hoppier than your typical Pilsner and Lager. But it's not too much of a bite. Like I said, I'm pretty sensitive to sort of that bite, and I don't like too much hops in my beer. But this is great. It's a great balance. It kind of catches you off guard at first, but then you kind of embrace it. Pilsner is definitely lighter. The Lager I like a lot more than the Pilsner. Not that there's anything wrong with the Pilsner. The Lager, just because it's a darker beer, that tends to be what I go for most of the time. Jojo, what are you drinking over there?
So right now I am, in my left hand, I've got the Brooklyn Insulated Dark Lager, which is a seasonal for them. And this thing is fantastic. It is definitely bitier. They've put in some hops in here to give it more of that initial bite, but it's also got this like hints of roasted coffee in it. And it's very smooth. It's weird to say that something has a bite and is also smooth, but it runs down very, very well. I also have something that I'm teasing Alex about because Brooklyn puts out a brown ale. And we went to two different Total Wines. So I'm typical Puerto Rican. I was running late. And so instead of going to the Chantilly version that we always go to, I went to the Ashburn one nearest me. And so I had a couple different selections over there. And I picked that up. I haven't opened it yet. I figured I'd enjoy this insulated dark lager first, and then I'll try the brown ale as it comes up.
Yeah, the great thing about going to Total Wine is that they just have shelves where you can make your own six-packs. So I just grabbed 3 of the Pilsners and 3 of the Lagers to kind of drink throughout the week. And I didn't see any of those brown ales. Otherwise, I would have definitely gotten those because, as most people who listen to the show know, my favorite thing in the world is Newcastle Brown Ale.
So before we edit and even post this podcast today, I'm going to be driving down to Centerville to drop off 1 or 2 bottles of this brown ale to make sure Alex can get a try of this brown ale.
Like it's like Deanna's number 1, and then Newcastle and Star Wars tie for number 2. But Deanna, you're still more important than Newcastle and Star Wars. All right, just making sure she knows.
Didn't she get into the coffee stout from Stoughton's Like
yeah. So she's starting to embrace it, and she's starting to embrace some of the darker
little by
beers.
little.
I don't know. How about you, Eric? Is Leslie into any of the darker beers?
Yeah, from her perspective, anything that doesn't like singe her tongue with hops is a winner.
There you go.
So in the case of of beers like New Carnegie or even the classic Brooklyn Lager, we're all fans.
Good. We're going to get our ladies there one step at a time, one brewery at a time. We're going to enjoy this beer and get into some geeky talk. So let's talk about what's going on in the news.
Geek 30 News.
The Powerpuff Girls are back. Who remembers the
Powerpuff Girls?
Who remembers the Powerpuff Girls?
I do, definitely.
I do as well.
Yeah, that's kind of a fond memory from childhood.
I still remember when they first got introduced on Space Ghost Coast to Coast back on was it Cartoon Network?
Oh man, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Adult Swim.
That was pre-Adult Swim.
Yeah, so they introduced Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo. There was another one that they introduced. I think it wasn't Dexter's Lab. There was something else that they introduced.
it was Dexter's Lab and Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Okay, Courage is one I remember, but they did 3. No, maybe it wasn't, because they did 3 and Powerpuff Girls ultimately won and became the series. And people loved Johnny Bravo so much that they made it anyways.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And you know what? It was actually Adult Swim, because that was back when the Adult Swim breaks. Remember, like, you would see like the old people jumping in the pool? You remember that?
Yeah.
So it was like prior to the snarky, black background with the white text with, little snarky messages here and there and little sarcastic messages. This was like truly, it was themed Adult Swim.
It was a lot more organic back then. It was a lot more embracing before it became sort of, I don't know, corporate, for lack of a better word. Yeah, no,
that's true. So I read this article. They're rebooting it on Cartoon Network. And, this is kind of following the same sort of themes that we've been seeing for the past year or so with old cartoons coming back. And let me see. Oh, God, I'm on Entertainment Weekly's site and their audio just went crazy in my ears. But
I had to hit pause on that, too.
Yeah. So I've got this article here, and they've they kind of talk a little bit about it. And I wanted to share it with you guys. Eric, what's your thought on rebooting all of these old cartoons?
I'm generally a fan. I know that kind of puts me in the aggressive minority because people tend to hold their childhood love of cartoons in reverence. But I got to say, I kind of appreciate it. Sometimes it's a really big win, and more often than not, unfortunately, it can kind of go south. But I remember even a few years ago, not to go completely off topic, but they rebooted He-Man, which was like, I'm a little bit older than you guys. I'm 32. So He-Man was like very much part of my childhood. And there's a whole... By the way. Do you remember He-Man?
I do remember He-Man. I was in Germany when I watched He-Man, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And how ridiculous that was. I mean, they rebooted that for a while, and it wasn't that terrible. Right. And they've rebooted like G.I. Joe, God knows how many times at this point. Yeah. So in general, I got to say, I'm a fan. And I feel like if done in the right way with the right writing team and the right creative team behind it, they can leverage the nostalgia in a way that's positive for the old people who want to come back and watch it, and hopefully make it something fresh and new for the newbies.
Yeah, totally. And I'm good with it. I like seeing some of these older franchises come back. If they do it right, I love to embrace it. If they don't do it right, I just stop watching.
Like I'm excited for the continuation of Samurai Jack. That'll be exciting for me.
That'll be really cool. But this is an article from Entertainment Weekly that was sent over, and it says Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup are ready to save the day starting in April. Cartoon Network's revamped The Powerpuff Girls will debut on Monday, April 4th at 6 p.m., a time slot early enough to allow the trio to fight off bad guys before bedtime. The animated favorite about the 3 wide-eyed superhero sisters protecting their home from Townsville. There it is. Remember Townsville?
I do remember
all this
Townsville.
Is coming back. Protecting their home of Townsville against villains of all shapes and sizes while also having to juggle schoolwork and normal life will air back-to-back episodes followed by 2 weeks of new adventures through April 15th each weeknight. Afterwards, the season continues every Thursday at 6 p.m. starting April 21st. So that's kind of cool that they're bringing this back, and they're really, targeting the same kind of audience. They're not necessarily making it more mature. Sometimes we've seen some of these things from our childhood. They're making more mature to kind of appeal to
like
where
Muppets.
We are now. Yeah, kind of like where we are now at our age and our stage of life. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that that's the right move?
I say keep it consistent. I am all aboard with this.
Yeah, same here. It sounds like they have a new cast. They've got new voices behind the characters, which should be pretty interesting. They've got a new writing group. It's got a different showrunner. So, it seems like they're taking a completely fresh look. I'm okay with that. I think a fresh take on wacky, weird, postmodern cartoons like the Powerpuff Girls is generally a positive thing. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. And can you watch this stuff from where you are in Sweden?
So officially no, but I'm very good at the internet.
Fair enough. Fair
I know
enough.
the only issue I think I've heard so far is a lot of people who are avid listeners or watchers of the show are not very happy with Buttercup's voice, saying it's almost too boyish at this point. And I think that's the only gripe that people are having with it, because they've recasted all the voices.
I hadn't heard that, but I thought that myself when I was watching a little teaser clip. I forgot where I was watching it. It was somewhere on the internet.
Right.
But that I thought the same thing, man. I don't know. It's not necessarily going to turn me off from wanting to watch the show.
It's not make or break at this point, but that's the only gripe I've heard about it so far. And if that's the only detail that people are griping about, then it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I say bring it on.
Exactly.
Let's watch it. Let's enjoy it. Let's accept it for what it is. So next up, it was a really big deal on the interwebs that we finally saw Spider-Man in the new Captain America Civil War trailer. What was your all's original thoughts, reactions, if you will, to that?
I'm going to let Eric go first on this one.
Sure. So I loved it. I love Spider-Man. I cannot underscore that enough. I think Spider-Man is my absolute favorite superhero. And
really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also a staunch defender of the Sam Raimi, Spider-Man films. I feel like Spider-Man 1 and 2 are arguably two of the greatest superhero films ever made.
Not to cut in, but you just gained so much respect level on my side. So
I'm just saying.
On the same level on that. Sam Raimi.
Absolutely. They were the first two Sam Raimi films were, just
a portion of the third.
Films.
The Sandman portion of the third was great. You can see where they cut and paste Venom into the third one.
Totally. And the third one was an okay popcorn movie. I kind of got a slight kick out of emo Spider-Man. But the first two were, honestly, in my opinion, two of the greatest action films ever made. Two of the greatest, they both got to be in the top 100 American films ever made. I love them. And so I'm very excited by the direction they're taking. I wasn't a huge fan of I forget his name, last name Garfield. What's his first name?
Andrew.
New guy.
The Englishman.
Yeah, exactly. The Andrew Garfield, kind of Amazing Spider-Man series that Sony kind of kicked off before this new guy came on. I wasn't a huge fan of that, the direction they were going there. But I love the return to the bright, red and blue suit. And I think injecting them into the MCU is the right idea. So I loved it. I think it's going to be awesome. And I'll let Jojo talk.
So my take is, again, I agree with you with the first two Spider-Mans and a portion of the third Spider-Man. I didn't like the reboots. I thought they were rebooted too soon, personally. And for whatever reason, Sony loves to take a high schooler and throw them into the real world immediately. It doesn't allow them to grow, through high school and through like their early college years, whatever. Which Spider-Man is, he's younger than most everybody, and that's his opinions can be a lot different than many of the guys that are in the Civil War because he's got such a young attitude towards everything. I am excited to have. It is still owned by Sony, the IP, but it's going to be run by Disney's Marvel, so it's going to be done well. It's one of those things, kind of like with me in the lightsabers in Star Wars. I don't think they should have shown it until the movie. I felt like this was almost forced, especially being tacked on towards the end of a trailer, just to kind of get people to watch the movie. But people are already going to watch the movie in my kind of sense. So you already knew he was going to be in the movie. They kind of threw it out there, and I feel like that's a surprise that could have waited till the actual film.
See, I think that it was the perfect amount. I think it was just the fix that we as the geeks needed to, first of all, believe, yeah, Spider-Man's in this movie, and also to point out the fact that his eyes move. Did you guys notice that?
I did like that fact of it. They took
that
cues from Deadpool, and so that way he can actually emote through the mask.
Yes, that was huge for me. I heard that they were planning on doing that, but nothing was confirmed. When I saw that, it literally like gave me goosebumps because I was like, because I mean, I don't know as much as Eric here, but isn't that staying true to the comic adaptation of Spider-Man? His eyes do emote in the comics, don't they?
Yeah, generally, yes. I think there were some Todd McFarlane era Spider-Man comics where, he like half of his face was just white. Similar to kind of Spawn, right? Where he didn't necessarily emote all that much. But yeah, generally that's the case. And that's a staple through all of comics as well, right? I mean, Batman in the comics emotes through his eyes as well. So, yeah.
And through the animated series and whatnot, too.
Yeah. Yep, certainly. So I think it's great. I can't wait to see more of this. I hope that they don't go overboard, kind of like what they did with The Force Awakens, and unlock more and more trailers where we see more and more and more of Spider-Man. But another thing to mention is Black Panther was featured a lot more in this trailer. What were your all's thoughts on that?
I am so excited. I love Black Panther. I love the fact that they kind of name dropped, not really name dropped, but they called out to Wakanda, his original tribe in Africa, in the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron. So they kind of set the precedence for him to be in this next movie. So they've kind of, I love the, again, the very cohesive, very organic approach to everything. Everything is included in every movie. So it's not, cut and paste, kind of like Venom in this third Spider-Man movie. Everything's kind of built to that point. And so when you finally see Black Panther on screen, it's like, yes, I want this. This is awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool to see his fight scene, I think, against Winter Soldier, like little snippets of that fight scene. Yeah. Right. Oh, I can't wait to see that in action. That's going to be awesome.
And I'm curious because the Netflix series, so Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Daredevil, that whole kind of series, those are also connected to the MCU, right? I'm wondering so I'm wondering if there's going to be any sort of cross promotional or cross referential stuff happening outside of the occasional like Easter eggy mention of the movies. I'm curious if they're going to.
Is that they're building up to that? Is that what is it? Thanos, the guy with the Infinity Gauntlet?
Yep.
That in that movie they're going to have over 40 superheroes. So I think they're going to pull from the pool of both the shows and the movies to make a movie involving Thanos.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Daredevil and what's the other dude with
Spiderman
the fire?
And
Iron Fist.
Including Ant-Man, Spider-Man, all these new characters that are being introduced now.
And and actually some context on that, my buddy, shout out to Omar, guy I work with. He has been lending me the Infinity Gauntlet series of comics. I mean, these are like the original comics from, I don't know, when was that written? Like 80s, 90s?
Right.
So he handed them to me. I've read the first two so far. It's fascinating. But we were talking a little bit about it. Wolverine, I guess, is a pretty big part of this. I wonder how they're going to get Wolverine into this whole mess.
Well, see, that's the problem is he's owned by Fox, and I don't know that they will bring Wolverine in because and this is one of the issues with just kind of like where my big gripe with Ant-Man is that Hank Pym is as Ant-Man, and they cut him out entirely and brought in a new one, which they did a fantastic job. Don't get me wrong, but they changed the entire comic universe to fit the Marvel movie cinematic universe.
And just to be clear, that was Eric Morales in that movie, not Paul Rudd.
Right. Obviously. So did a fantastic job.
If people ever see a picture of Eric, he's basically Paul Rudd. I think it's hilarious.
You're too kind.
He's one of my favorite actors then right now. So thank you, Eric, for a great performance.
We're big fans.
Thank you, guys.
I don't know. I don't know that they're going to bring him into this universe. Because again, it took hell and high water for them to be able to pull Spider-Man from Sony. And even then, Sony still owns Spider-Man, so all the money they make out of it goes to Sony. I don't know that they'll be able to pull Wolverine away from Fox.
Yeah, I'm kind of concerned about that because they do make a lot of mention to the X-Men in the comics as I'm reading it. So I'm like, and She-Hulk, what are they going to do about not bringing She-Hulk into it?
Right.
I'm being sarcastic a little bit.
Part of me, and this is totally a conspiracy theory, but part of me feels like there's still a chance for them to loop in the kind of the Fox-owned IP into this, and it's been a deal similar to the Sony deal. Right. I mean, so, Sony got to the table because, for one, they realized that, okay, they own a tiny subset of the characters. It's mutually beneficial for us to work together with Disney and Marvel to make something equally awesome. And the financial details are, good for everybody. Right. Mm-hmm. With Fox, they were dealing with, they basically just own the X-Men, anything that touches the X-Men. Deadpool completely rewrote the entire financial case for that series. I mean, Deadpool, I don't know if you guys seen some of the graphs on Netflix, but the kind of the return on investment on Deadpool, like purely from a per capita perspective, has been just unbelievably massive. So this is a gold mine for them. And if you guys saw Deadpool, that was littered with, tongue-in-cheek references to the MCU throughout.
Oh, wait, I don't know. I mean, if you guys saw Deadpool, you saw there was reference to the MCU right there when they on the last scene where they were fighting on one of the crashed drop ships,
right?
Or the what are they? No, the sky ships. You know what I'm talking about, like the
Tricarrier.
Yeah. So I mean, that's right there. That's from the MCU. It was like, so I think that's. I want to see Deadpool and the X-Men and like all these people make their way into the formal MCU. I just hope corporate politics don't come into play, and I guess
it may or may not happen. I think it depends on. So Joss Whedon is brilliant. But Fantastic Four is usually the group that ends up fighting the Skrull or the Kree, and I mean it also bleeds into the Avengers and the X-Men a little bit as well. But when they ended up the first Avengers movie. And when he first showed Thanos, he goes, well, in a different language, they called me the Chikari, which is another version of, I can't remember, I think it's the Skrull. So they were able to find a way of referencing something that's in the Fantastic Four universe without actually copywriting it.
That's true.
Getting in trouble for copyright. So they might find a way around it. They've done it so far just because of brilliant directors and brilliant writers. I would like to see them try to make this work. I just don't know if they will with Fox. I know Fox already killed Fantastic Four to the ground, so I'm sure they will let that go because they can't really do anything with it right now. But I know they want to hold on to X-Men, I don't know, hands like clenched.
That's the only thing they have left.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the other piece of it also is that Marvel and Disney on the comics side, right? So kind of the canon underpinnings, the comics side of the business, they've been slowly killing off the X-Men and the Fantastic Four for the last 8 years.
It's true.
They basically said, hey, if our money is now being made in movies, if we can't really negotiate here, then we're just going to slowly kill off the entire universe. I think at some point that might be an effort to bring people to the table, but who knows? Part of me, I'm a giant X-Men fan, particularly, I grew up in the early 90s, so that part of my childhood is really closely attached to the X-Men. Definitely. So hopefully they figure something out, but we'll see.
All this is making me want to do those is to get back into reading comic books, and I fully embrace it. I love it. Okay, on to the next. This is kind of a depressing topic, but not really, because the Dos Equis man, the most interesting man in the world. You guys know him, right?
Of course.
This is on the topic of beer and general pop culture. It's worth mention that he is retired. They're retiring that character, and this has been. It is marketing genius. He's become a meme, one of the most recognizable commercials. And you immediately tie his face to Dos Equis.
Right.
He's like 77 years old or something, but they're retiring him.
10 years ago, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I think even longer than that. I thought it was, maybe it was. I've got an article here that, I put all these articles in the show notes, folks. So take a look at this. There's a video that you can watch about how he says goodbye. Essentially, yeah. So 77-year-old Jonathan Goldsmith is his name. And they announced that he will be retiring from this role, and they sent him off into space on a one-way mission to Mars. Is kind of how they left it off. But the commercial is hilarious. He's saying goodbye to all these foreign dignitaries and different important political figures. You know, you don't know who these people actually are, but you can tell that they're of some kind of importance. And the crowd of people behind him is just huge. And it shows the tremendous impact that this man has had on their lives. So I wanted to go back and ask you guys, what is your favorite, most interesting man in the world moment?
It's kind of hard. I mean, it's kind of like Chuck Norris memes. You know, there's so many of them. You know, which one to recall? Right?
I'm having trouble too. That's why I need Jarl's help.
Because there's one like even his enemies have him as an emergency contact or something like that. Or
yeah.
His beard is insured for X amount of dollars, or is a he's an organ donor for his beard or something. I can't remember what it was, but I mean, so many great lines.
You know, it's funny is whenever I see these commercials, for some reason, it always reminds me. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Mad Men.
Right? Yeah, here and there. I've watched it every once in a while.
So, very, very quickly, one of the main characters in Mad Men is a guy named Don Draper. He's played by John Hamm. And Don Draper was kind of pushed up as this incredibly kind of eloquent, super silky smooth, like ridiculously like handsome and powerful man who can suck the oxygen out of the room, right? That's kind of the persona that he builds. But the show goes to lengths over several seasons to humanize him and to break him down a little bit, and then you quickly realize like he's kind of a jerk, et cetera, right? The most interesting man in the world takes that like the perfected alpha male epitome and turns it up to 11, and it never introduces any negativity at all. Like he is just the most interesting man in the world, and he's amazingly awesome at everything that he does. And so, I think that every single time I see his commercials, it's I absolutely love them. It absolutely makes me want to just guzzle Dos Equis, and I do as a result. And I think my favorite like little bit of detail out of the last commercial is the guy's rocking a tuxedo into space. Like,
It's awesome.
He always looks so sharp, and it's a brilliant marketing move.
Now, one of the things, the original Star Trek series, the OG series, he was one of the red shirts that actually survived.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That actor?
Is that a real fact?
That's a real fact. No, that's real life. He was one of the extras. Obviously, he wasn't important and nobody knew about him, but he was one of the red shirts that actually survived his episode.
That right there is the best meme. Hey, and by the way, shout out to Stacy. I saw Stacy, somebody that I used to go to high school with, over the weekend, and she mentioned that she loves the show, and she needed us to talk about more Star Trek. So there you go, Stacy. More Star Trek just for you. Jojo did it.
The interesting man in the world. I haven't met Stacy yet, but the most interesting man in the world was the only surviving red shirt of a Star Trek series. He did not get killed.
There you go. That is hilarious.
I can't believe that hasn't already been a commercial.
It's so appropriate. Oh my God. That's brilliant.
Well, I'm sure there's like a copyright issue. They can't just like reference Star Trek, in his past, life and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I know that they were writing about, who they would introduce. And one of the things they were throwing around was, well, maybe, get somebody young, somebody fresh. But how can you be the most interesting man in the world if you're young? You haven't established yourself as being the most interesting man in the world,
True.
So I don't know how they can make it as a young person unless they just go a different direction altogether.
And I don't know, what nationality do you think he was portraying, by the way? Some kind of Caribbean nationality?
So I cheated and read a lot of stuff about this. He's actually Jewish from New York.
Oh, yeah.
But when he practiced for this, when he auditioned for this, he brought in an Argentinian actor, and so he portrayed South America when we did this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he's got a little bit of like a Castilian lilt to it. I could totally see, some serious Argentinian guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I loved it. All I can think of though is like either you, Eric, or Jojo could take the place with the glorious beards that you guys are able to grow.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis.
You can work on it. You could.
I need to
you
work
get there.
on it. Yeah,
You can work. And
here with my mustache right now.
Jojo's already got a little bit of gray happening in his beard.
There we go.
So,
A lot of gray. Shoot.
yeah, that's all right. You're not that.
By
old
the
yet.
way, I opened up a new beer. You're gonna love this brown ale.
Really, is it that good?
Yeah, it's really good.
I'm on to the lager now. I just finished the pilsner, and I'm loving this lager. It's really good. we're gonna trade beers. So I'll give you a couple lagers, or a lager and a pilsner for a couple of brown ales. Yeah,
Definitely.
Deal. All right, let's get into our guest topic of the day. This is focused on our guest, Eric Morales, who's here with us from across the Atlantic Ocean. Eric, why don't you share a little bit about what has influenced you to kind of pursue this gaming, I guess, career?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, really easy answer. I love video games. I've been playing video games literally all of my life. I was born in 1984, and that's the year the NES came out. And by the time I could hold the little square 2-button controller, I was doing it. So I think for me, and certainly for every generation after that, video games have been like a critical part of our cultural background and the way that we experience the world. And so something that I was so passionate about and so appreciative of as I got older, I realized this is what I wanted to do with my life as well, my professional life. And so, I've worked at a lot of different companies up to now. I've had the pleasure of working with Alex in the past as well. But now, as of last year, I run Amazon Web Services gaming business for the Nordics. It's been a really cool experience, and I've had a tremendous amount of fun working with some of the most amazing games companies on the planet. And Amazon, our parent company, Amazon.com, is obviously working in a lot of different facets of the gaming world. They're obviously a giant retailer, and they make games. They bought a really fantastic studio, Double Helix, a couple years ago. Double Helix, for those who might not be aware, they're the guys that made the Strider remake, as
Nice.
They're the guys that made Killer Instinct on Xbox One.
Oh, okay.
Very cool.
Yeah, so really, really fantastic studio. Amazon acquired them a little while ago, and they've been working on some pretty fantastic stuff ever since. But in addition to that, right, I mean, they also maintain their own app store for Kindle devices as well as for Android devices. And so there's a kind of a mobile connection there as well. And AWS, which is the company I work for, has more than 50 services that games companies can actually utilize to launch games, to power games. We recently, Amazon Game Services, which is kind of another organization nearby, launched our own games engine called Lumberyard.
Really?
Which allows people to, it's been really, really fantastic to see it, to see it launch in the last couple of months. For those who aren't aware, a games engine is a series of software tools that allows you to actually build games. And there are a lot of really popular games engines out there. There are folks, there's pieces of software like Unreal Engine, which is pretty ubiquitous. That's powered games like Gears of War, for example.
Right.
Among many others. And then you've got Unity, which is a very, very popular cross-platform game engine. And a great, Unity is also a great AWS customer, by the way.
Cool.
And we've launched our own, Amazon.com has launched its own games engine that lets people build brand new games. And it's totally free, and everybody should give it a try if they want to make games.
So I can right now go to Amazon and download this thing and play around with it and make my own game.
Absolutely. So right now, you could just Google Amazon Lumberyard, and you will be able to download the full source code of our games engine, and that'll allow you to build. Today, I believe the game engine supports PC, PS4, and Xbox One, but they've announced also that they're launching support for VR. So, platforms like Oculus and Vive and Gear VR, among others. And in the future, they're also going to launch mobile support. But it's pretty cool. And the tools, if you're a developer and you've been using other engines, specifically Crytek's CryEngine, you'll find that the visuals engine in Lumberyard is very similar. We've actually taken a lot of the code from the CryEngine code base, and we're certainly the company's forking it in a different direction. So it's going to be its very own its own distinct beast, but it's already an incredibly powerful tool for people, and it's totally free, right? So
wow.
The company doesn't charge people for actually using it or downloading it. They don't want to take, if you actually build a game and release it, Amazon doesn't take a percentage of your revenue. You can do whatever you'd like. Kind of the only things to keep in mind are that if you have a cloud component, it has to sit on top of Amazon Web Services, or you have to host it locally yourself. But that's it. Everything else is totally free.
That's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I'm not going to be able to make next week's podcast because I'm going to be neck deep in this.
Yeah, and I'm on the website right now. We'll provide a link to Lumberyard just so that folks can reference it. If it's something that you're interested in checking out, I highly encourage you to do so. I'm looking at some of these. The visuals are stunning. I think that's a testament to the engine behind it, obviously.
I used to love building worlds in StarCraft and Unreal Tournament and whatnot. And so the actual build a game, that'd be fantastic.
That's so cool. Eric, have you played around with it much?
I haven't had a chance to play around with it too much, to be honest. I don't have a development background, so it's been the tool is primarily designed for folks that have some sort of a programming background. Over time, they're going to add the tools to kind of make the learning curve less steep over time.
Okay,
but this is a professional tool set, right? So it's not like a WYSIWYG engine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And so it sounds like Amazon is all in the gaming business, and I don't I hear about it because we're friends on Facebook and I see some of the cool things that you post. But how long has Amazon actually been in the whole gaming scene?
Amazon has been in business for a little over 20 years, and it started out selling books and eventually moved into CDs and DVDs and then video games and things that had kind of a similar size. And over time, the company, as it's branched out into other fields, has, kind of came to the realization that content is super important. And if you look at the other Amazon companies like Prime Video and, even platforms like Twitch, which Amazon acquired before, they quickly realized that the video games are the way that a massive subset of consumers are experiencing popular culture, right?
Yeah.
In the past it was television and movies, and now, from a pure market opportunity perspective, the games industry is significantly larger than the motion picture industry, number one. And then number two, there were so many aspects of Amazon's kind of go-to-market strategy, whether it's on the retail side or whether it's, the Twitch platform, which allows gamers to stream their gameplay to anybody live in the world, right? And there's an ads platform that supports that, to AWS, which allows people to build multiplayer game servers in the cloud, or to render 3D assets in the cloud and deliver them to end users. There's a lot of aspects of Amazon's core business that touch on the games industry. And so it made a lot of sense over time for them to not only develop their own studio, but also, get into the business of publishing games and also get into the business of delivering games to Android and Kindle devices, which is what the Amazon App Store is about. So they've been at this for a few years now, and the company's doubling down on it. If the fact that they're stepping into the games industry with their own games engine, which today the most popular commercially available game engines are Unreal by Epic Games, Unity, which we already talked about, CryEngine by Crytek, and then a lot of the bigger publishers like EA with their Frostbite engine. And a bunch of the other kind of large-scale publishing developers had developed their own, right? Amazon felt like there was an entry in the market, an opportunity for them to step in and offer some expertise and make people's lives easier if they wanted to build new games. So
that's really fascinating, man. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I mean, for the folks out there listening right now, kind of like me, who are like, man, how could I get into that industry? Like, you're somebody that kind of worked your way up to this position. What do you recommend to folks out there who are listening, who are very interested in entering into the gaming market in some form or another, and making that reality?
Sure. So, I think for me, for a long time, I played a lot of video games in my spare time, and I was also kind of obsessed with entering the industry somehow, right? I thought, there must be some sort of magical door that I can walk through, like Narnia, that gets me into this industry somehow, right? And the challenge that I had was I'm not an engineer, so I can't code, right? I didn't. For a very long time, I didn't have subject matter expertise, but what I did have was knowledge of what was popular in kind of the game space. I played a lot of video games myself. I understood kind of what the core trends were, and for me personally, I was able to kind of work through the business side, right? Because fundamentally, the games industry is still a business, and there really aren't that many differences between the games industry and, let's say, traditional software as a service companies or even traditional software companies.
Sure.
Fundamentally, they're building new products and they're trying to figure out innovative ways to get them to their consumers and sell more of them, right? And so I was able to work through the business side, but there were a lot of other angles, right? I know plenty of people who started out in quality assurance, for example, right? So literally game testers trying to figure out where characters get stuck and identifying bugs and helping the engineering team squash them. And oftentimes, from just that segment of the market or that segment of the industry, you can then step into an engineering role because you learn to fix your own problems.
Yeah,
that's one key example. Another example is in the marketing space. So there are a lot of folks who start working in the games industry by working as a community manager, and that's helping customers from a support perspective, make sure that they're getting the right experience. This is particularly important in a world where there are hundreds of millions of people playing mobile games that offer in-app purchases, right? So there's a financial component to customer service, which is relatively new to the industry compared to, let's say, 20 years ago when you bought a cartridge, an NES cartridge from Sears or wherever it is you bought your video games back then. And that was it, right? I mean, that game was hard-coded onto a little piece of silicone that you shoved in your console, and that was it. If there was a bug in it, well, then you dealt with the bug.
Right. It's gotten so much more dynamic now with patches. And, like I log onto my computer, play World of Warcraft, and there's constantly patches and stuff, squashing bugs, and lots of different content kind of come into it. You don't see that back in the day, so it's definitely evolved.
For sure.
A lot.
Yeah, when you think about it, right? One of the big concepts in kind of the technology industry is this idea of sustained engineering. And that's where the expense in delivering a product really is.
Right.
So if you think about Windows, for example, right? Developing Windows is incredibly expensive, but supporting Windows and maintaining it and making sure it's secure and patched, that's where a lot of the cost comes in over time. And it's the same with a video game now, especially with all these online experiences. If you're playing a first-person shooter and you're playing multiplayer, the game server needs to be able to detect that the bullet being fired from one gun on one side of the map that enters the head of an avatar on the other side of the map. If that breaks the physics of the game, well, then that tells you that you either have a glitch or a cheater, and that cheater or that glitch can have a pretty big impact on the revenue of your company, right? If people don't feel like it's fair to play, then it's not fun anymore. It's not fun anymore to play. And that affects your bottom line.
Right.
So there's a lot of different avenues to answer your original question. There's all these different avenues from both from the kind of customer sat side to the marketing side to the sales side of this equation to the quality assurance side that are great kind of entry level roles into the games industry. And once you're in, it's really on the individual to figure out what it is they're interested in and to stay aggressive. It's super common for folks to bounce around between games companies, certainly here in the Nordics, for example. Marcus Marcus Persson, so Notch, right? So the guy who founded Mojang and created Minecraft, he formerly worked for King, the guys who made Candy Crush.
Wow. Yeah, and they were bought for a few billion from Activision Blizzard.
That's right.
Like a
yeah,
ton of money.
5.9.
Yep.
Crazy. So there's a lot of movement in this industry, and it's seen as a positive, right? Having exposure to different lines of business, to different types of games, to different genres, that's super powerful.
That's fascinating, man. Thanks so much for the insight. Folks, if you're interested in learning more about this stuff, again, I'm going to have the Lumberyard URL in the show notes. So take a look at this awesome engine that Eric mentioned, and if this career is something that you're interested in exploring, I hope that you found this sort of talk helpful. I know that I talk to a lot of folks because we have common interests, and they're always like, "Oh, I would love to do something in video games," and so it's always interesting to get people's perspective from within the industry. So thank you so much, Eric.
No worries, man. And actually, the last thing I'll mention there is that oftentimes the games industry is a great way to kick off new and exciting ideas as well. So are you guys familiar with Slack, for example?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So Slack, the company that founded Slack, TinyBits, was actually originally a games company, right? So they had launched a game for iOS that failed. And they were able to take a step back and realize, okay, well, maybe this game wasn't super successful, but this communications app that we developed on the side, well, maybe we could commercialize that. And all of a sudden, that Slack app became a massive success. They've raised a lot of money. I think their valuation is north of $3 billion. And
oh, wow.
They're pushing just a massive success. And that's a good example of the games industry touching not just video games and not just technology in general, but really all facets of the life that we live, right? Slack is not a video game, it's a communications app, but it came out of a games company. So it's a very, very cool space, and there's a ton of opportunity for people.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. Thanks so much for sharing that insight. So again, Amazon Lumberyard, I'll post a link to this in the show notes, and take a look at it, folks, and definitely, go chase your dreams, guys. It's out there. If you want to go do this sort of work, Eric worked his way from the bottom to the top.
Now he's here.
Yeah, now he's here. Now the whole clique's effing here. All right. I think that right there is a time to wrap up the show. And as we wrap up the show, I want to give a quick shout out. Again, we encourage you guys to leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Shout out to the last 3 folks to leave us a 5-star rating. So far, we have 35 5-star ratings on iTunes.
What?
Yeah, JMU Dude 82. It's Poirier and Anna Kuna. Thank you guys so much for your latest 5-star reviews. Keep them coming. Feel free to leave a 5-star review. We'll give you a shout out on the show. And with that in mind, Jojo, where can people reach us?
Well, as always, we do have an email address. You can get us at geek30podcast@gmail.com, and 30 is spelled out, geek30podcast@gmail.com. You can leave us a voicemail if you're old school like me and have a rotary phone. You can pick up the phone, call 443-424-3350. Leave us a voicemail. We're on Twitter at Geek30 or on Facebook, Geek30 Happy Hour.
Awesome. And, let's also, before we actually wrap things up, I wanted to quickly get into a couple of emails. Let's quickly go to an email from Don, who was on the show.
Don, did he?
Yeah, that Don. So Diddy left us an email. He says, Alex and Jojo, one of the best shows I've ever watched is a British sci-fi drama called Black Mirror. It's different, thoughtful, and introspective, and I found it unbelievably riveting. There are only 2 seasons of 3 episodes each and a Christmas special, but there is talk that Netflix is going to pick it up for a new season. The current episodes are available on Netflix. So I'm going to check that out. Diddy, thank you so much for the shout out. He also leaves a PS. He says, I can see a lot of troll behavior coming from the front with No Man's Sky. There will be whole worlds with every plant, mineral, and animal named some derivative of penis. That's very true. That's per our last episode. If you guys didn't check it out, we had a great conversation with Ori from Dragonfruit, who has his own. It's a geek dating app. I recommend you guys check it out.
So Black Mirror is pretty solid because I'm pulling up on the internet right now, and IMDb is getting it 8.8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 on TV.com, and 94% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Sweet. Yeah.
I just to chime in here, I am a huge Black Mirror fan. I can wholeheartedly recommend it. If you guys haven't seen it yet, it's basically a modern version of a much darker version of the Twilight Zone. So there's a very aggressive twist in every episode, and there's no kind of consistent narrative between the episodes. Each one is super self-contained, and even sometimes takes place in a different universe or a different timeline or a different time of the different date. But all of them center around technology and something involving technology going horribly wrong.
Too cool.
So very, very cool. Highly recommend it. You should check it out.
I got some homework to do.
Heck yeah, me too. And then we had another email came in from Nate from PA. He says, "Hey guys, would love to hear your take on the Jar Jar Binks is actually a Sith Lord theory. Gotta admit, I'm rooting for anything that would help me change my perception that he's only just an annoying Muppet sidekick trying to get a cheap laughs from kids." Thanks from Nate from PA. Thank you for sending an email, Nate. Nate provided a link to the YouTube video. I wanted to kind of get the audience's reaction from this actually, and then maybe we could talk about it on the next show. Jojo, have you had a chance to look up this theory? Did you ever look at anything like that?
Well, I haven't seen the YouTube video yet, but I have seen a lot of evidence on the internet, written stuff, and whatnot. And like a lot of it to me actually makes sense. And I think the problem was it was such a bad character. The reason why the machete version exists is to cut out Jar Jar Binks as much as possible, right?
Yep.
But if they had developed it correctly, I think it could have been really awesome. But yeah, they kind of sort of the way they did Venom and Spider-Man 3, they cut and pasted Count Dooku into there. They never really explained Cypher Diaz, the guy who commissioned the clone army. So there's a lot of like holes that they never patched, and so it kind of actually makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's interesting. I've heard about this theory, and I'm wanting to post this in the show notes for the audience to listen to. I would love to get the audience's reaction to this video and chime in, and then maybe we could talk about it at the beginning of the next show in a little bit more detail. But I will post this again in the show notes. Thank you, Nate, for providing this video. We'll do our homework and watch this and give you some feedback.
And Black Mirror.
That and Black Mirror. So Don will let you know about that. So guys, thanks so much for listening. If you'd love to chime in, like what Jojo said, feel free to email us geek30podcast@gmail.com. You can also leave us a voicemail 443-424-3350, or hit us up on Twitter @geek30. We've been getting a lot of great comments and stuff on Twitter, so we appreciate that. Again, leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. And until next time, guys, we will see you later.
Mojo Jojo signing out.
Eric, you want to say bye?
Yep. Bye, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. See ya.